Hey guys, what's going on? This is Fred2266 here. Today I'm going to continue reading Starbloom Chronicles by Lisa Wolf. We are on chapter 5. Start of the weekend. It is over 6,500 words, but that's okay, because yesterday I read over 8,000 words of an adorable story called The New Home. And this is not as adorable because Starbloom is ugly, but that's okay because, you know, it's like the ugly duckling, but she's still a duck. She's an ugly duck. That's all there is to it. I just woke up from a nap, so I don't feel like being funny. I don't feel like doing anything except reading. So we'll do that. All 4 remaining chapters. Don't expect me to be funny, because it's not gonna happen. Get started. Starbloom was up early the next morning, sitting up and looking around, yawning softly, wondering if this was going to become a habit. Slipping out of bed, she made her way downstairs. Since it was the weekend, she didn't have to rush to go to school. Getting to the main hall of the library, she saw Twilight was slumped over a book sleeping. She smiled and rolled her eyes lightly before going into the kitchen as quietly as she could to make some tea and toast. She sat at the table quietly, sipping her tea and nibbling on her toast as she thought about what she should do today. Since she didn't have school, she today figured she could go to the Cutie Mark Crusaders headquarters and have fun with her new friends. As she thought about what to do, Twilight came into the kitchen yawning. Looking over, she saw Starbloom blinking at her. "You're up early. I figured you would sleep in since there's no school today," she stated as she went over to get herself a cup of tea and join her at the table. "Yeah, I woke up early again today," Starbloom replied, smiling as she slid over the last of the toast to Twilight. "I'm starting to wonder if it's going to become a habit. Speaking of, you must have been up late studying again." Twilight blushed lightly at Starbloom, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I fell asleep at the desk," Twilight said as she floated over a piece of toast and took a bite, smiling. "Do you have any plans for today?" I was thinking about that when you came in, actually," Starbloom said, smiling. "I thought about going to the Crusaders Clubhouse and spend time with my friends, if that's all right." She smiled, looking at Twilight. "Of course. If you want to go spend time with your friends, that's fine with me. I won't be here around lunchtime, though. I'll be at the train station to pick up Spike," Twilight said, smiling back at Starbloom, taking another sip of her tea. Starbloom nods, but had a light tinge of guilt wash over her at the mention of Spike. She was still a bit uneasy at the thought of seeing him as much as she missed him. "Oh yeah, he's coming back today," she smiled, trying to hide the feeling of guilt. Twilight gave her a soft smile as she looked over at the small filly. "Don't worry, Starbloom. I'll be here to help you," she said, giving her a reassuring look. That did make Starbloom feel better, and she nodded at her, smiling, taking another drink of her tea. "Thank you, Twilight. Makes me feel better." She got to her feet and cleared away her dishes, setting them in the sink. Twilight's Day. Twilight watches as she clears away her dishes, smiling. Starbloom had adapted very well to not having magic to rely on. Twilight herself had practiced using her muzzle and hooves more than her magic for basic tasks. She wanted to be able to help Starbloom with tasks if needed. Not that Starbloom seemed to need any help with how well she had adapted. She sat at the table quietly sipping her tea while Starbloom finished clearing the table before leaving the kitchen and going to the main library hall. She mentally went over what she had to do today in her head. She gets up from the table and clears it with her magic before heading into the library, looking at Starbloom, who was sitting over at the corner of the library's main hall reading a book. Twilight made her way over to the desk and cleaned it up, saving her a spot in the book she was reading last night, using one of her bookmarks. She took down one of her parchments, quilling in ink well before starting to make a list of stuff she had to do today. She made out her list and stuffed each check as she did to make sure she didn't miss anything. Twilight knew she had to get Spike from the train station, get more ink for her inkwells, and she wanted to go talk with Rainbow Dash about Scootaloo's family situation. Rainbow Dash knew the most about Scootaloo and was the best person to ask. Twilight was double-checking her list when Starbloom got up and checked the time before grabbing her salad bags and heading to the library's front door. She called to Twilight. "See you later, Twilight." Twilight looks over at Starbloom and smiles at her. "Have fun, Starbloom, and try not to cause too much trouble," she called back to her with a soft giggle. She shakes her head lightly and smiles before heading upstairs to her bedroom to wash up. Sleeping at her desk to doodle for her mane, she could just image what Rarity would say if she saw her like this. She giggled softly, looking at herself in the mirror, doing her best Rarity impersonation. She told her reflection, "Well, since Twilight can do the best Rarity impersonation, does that mean I have to do Twilight's voice while also doing Rarity's voice? How does that work? How do you even do such a thing?" Okay. Darling, look at your mane. This simply must be taken care of immediately. There we go. She starts to shower and waits for the water to warm, brushing her teeth before getting into the shower to wash herself off. Well, I was warned of this. If this is the shower scene I was warned of, well, it's time to bring out Bill Cosby's voice. No, it appears not. Once she had herself washed off, she turns off the water and shakes herself off before coming out of the shower stall and dries herself with a towel, and going back to the mirror, smiling as she brushes out her mane and tail, nodding, and still in a rowdy voice. Much better, darling. She giggles softly to herself again and makes her way downstairs. She levitates her saddlebags over to her and on her back before heading out the door. She first made her way to the train station, checking the time on the large clock. Spike's train would be arriving pretty soon, so she decided it would be best to wait for him. She didn't have to wait that long. The Friendship Express was almost always on time. She watched as the train pulled into the station and came to a stop, watching as Pony started to leave the train. She spotted Spike and Smiles waving a hoof to him. Over here, Spike, she called out to him. Spike looked over and smiled big, running over to her, carrying his bag. Twilight! I never expected you to come pick me up, he said, wrapping his arms around her right foreleg, looking up at her. She smiled at him. Of course I would come and get my number one assistant, she replied with a grin, lifting him on her back, taking his bag and putting it into her saddlebag. Did you have a good trip? She asked as she made her way out of the train station. Yep, it was great. I had a lot of fun, and your parents are doing good, Spike said, riding on her back as he left the train station. I hope you had fun without me here in Ponyville. He smiled, looking around the town as Twilight made her way to the store to get the stuff she needed. I had a good time, but I'm glad you're back, Spike. Twilight smiled but changed directions. Instead of going through the ink, parchments, and quill, she headed to Sugar Cube Corner to get a snack first. She needed to tell him about Starbloom, even though she had thought about what to tell him. She was still nervous about it. Not nervous, nerves about it. Sugar Cube Corner? Spike questioned as he noticed her change in directions to head to the bakery instead of the office supply store. Twilight wasn't really known for spontaneity like this and got his attention. What's wrong? Twilight raised an eyebrow and looked over at him, but smiles. Don't worry, Spike. Nothing's wrong. But I do have something to tell you. She answered him as she heads into the bakery, looking over the choice of sweets, trying to decide what she wanted. Spike himself was practically drooling over her mane and back. Can I have one of those ruby fire cupcakes? Spike asked, looking at Twilight with big hopeful eyes, licking his lips. Twilight just smiled at him and rolled her eyes a bit, turning to look at the display again before making her own choice. Hey, Twilight, what brings you here? Pinkie asked, smiling from behind the counter. Hey, Spike, welcome back from Counterlot. She gave Spike a big grin before looking back to Twilight. Hi, Pinkie. I'm just stopping in for a snack. I'll have one of those banana nut muffins, and Spike wants a ruby fire cupcake. Twilight smiles at her friend before she tilts her head slightly. Hey, do you know where Rainbow Dash is today? Pinkie Pie starts to get what Twilight was asked for before pausing to think for a moment. I think Rainbow Dash is moving some clouds in from Cloudsdale for an upcoming rain shower, she said, looking over at Twilight, smiling as she brought over a small bag with a muffin and cupcake in it. Here you go. That'll be 5 bits. Oh, so she might be gone for a few hours. Twilight nods at Pinkie and smiles, floating her money from a saddlebag and giving it to Pinkie. Despite her happy-go-lucky attitude, Pinkie was a diligent worker. Thank you very much, Pinkie. Yep, I'll tell her you're looking for her, though, if she stops by. Pinkie smiled at Twilight, taking the bits and passes the bag over to Twilight. You're welcome, Twilight. Have a great day. Pinkie beamed at Twilight, waving a hoof at her. Twilight smiled back and waves as she started to make her way out of the bakery, passing the bag to Spike to hold for her. But after leaving the bakery, she frowned softly. She might have to wait and ask Rainbow Dash about Scootaloo later. Even with her speed, Rainbow Dash wouldn't be back for a few hours, since moving rain clouds took time. Twilight made her way over to a bench nearby and took a seat after Spike hopped off her back. She considered who else she could ask about the little filly's home life. She looked at Spike and smiled, but she had other things to do today. She can wait to find out about Scootaloo later. So what is it you wanted to talk to me about, Twi? Spike asked, smiling up at her. He opened the bag to take out his cupcake and took a big bite of it. Delicious fire ruby. Twilight giggled softly at him, smiling as she took out her muffin and took a bite of it. Oh, no! Don't burp. Every single chapter reading, I burp. I don't mean to do it. I just always drink Pib Extra, and apparently it's the most carbonated beverage on earth. And it always makes me burp. And it's getting annoying. Good. I was able to keep it down. But for how long? I don't know. Well, Spike, we have a new friend here in Ponyville named Starbloom. She's the little filly who lived with me at the library for the past few days." She She isn't going to replace me, is she?" Spike asked, looking up at her with big sad eyes. "I'm still your number one assistant, aren't I? You know I always do my best work and I'll work hard." He blinks at Twilight's hoof in his mouth. "Calm down, Spike. She isn't here to replace you. She does help around the library, but she has school, so it wouldn't work out if she was my assistant," she said, trying to calm him, remembering the same thing that happened with Aloysius when she brought him in. "To be honest, I adopted her now." Oh, that's words, but there's no quotation mark. Okay. "To be honest, I adopted her, so she's my daughter now." "Spike?" When he heard the word daughter, he fainted, and Twilight blinks at him, tilting her head faintly. "Well, that was unexpected. Spike, wake up!" She shakes him lightly to wake him up. After a moment, he sits up with a groan, looking at her. "You adopted a filly, Twilight?" He was surprised and more than a little stunned at the revelation. "Is she a good pony, at least?" he asked, finishing his cupcake in one last big bite, looking up at Twilight. "Who is she? Where did she come from?" Twilight sighed a bit at Spike, but smiled at him softly. "Yes, Spike, I did. She has no one else. She's a very good pony, and I know you'll like her a lot. Like I said, her name is Starbloom, and she's an earth pony from Canterlot." She decided to hold off on telling him who she really was and where she really came from for now. Spike nodded to Twilight, but wasn't sure about how he felt yet. "I trust you, Twilight, of course. And if you say she's a good pony, then I'm sure she's a good pony." He smiled up at her and hugged her foreleg again. It had been such a sudden surprise to him. He found it hard to imagine Twilight raising a young filly. "When do I get to meet her?" he asked after a few moments. "Later today. She's off playing with Applebloom, Scootle, and Sweetie Belle now. She should be home around dinner, though. She's looking forward to meeting you, though." She smiled at him, took another bite of her muffin. Spike nodded to Twilight, sitting next to her on the bench and again looking up at the sky. A few Pegasi were busy flying around, moving rain clouds again around and into place for the upcoming rainstorm. "Why did you want to know where Rainbow Dash was?" he asked, looking up at Twilight. "Oh, I just wanted to ask her some questions. Nothing you need to worry about, though," she answered, him smiling, finishing her muffin, getting off the bench, and waits for Spike to get back on her back. "Let's hurry and finish up my checklist for today and get back before the rain starts." "All right, Twilight," he said, smiling as he got back on her back, taking out the checklist and a quill, making off a few things on the list. "I have missed this. I actually got a little bit bored in Canterlot without you and your daily task lists." Twilight just grinned and rolled her eyes up at him before making her way to the office supply store to get the stuff she needed. "I missed having you here to help me with these lists," Twilight admitted to him. "Starbloom's Day." I really want to narrate something in Bill Cosby's voice, but there's nothing. It's not the time or the place. I don't feel like doing that. My brain started hurting. I'm actually doing good for this reading. I guess I need a good night's sleep, so I don't screw up. Okay then. Starbloom finished clearing away her dishes and went out of the kitchen to the library's main hall. First, she heads up to the room, wanting to get everything ready for her day out with her friends. She searches around before finding another of Twilight's old saddlebags. She didn't want to use the same one she used for school, not wanting to have to repack it for school. She tried to think of what would be the best items to bring with her. She gets some old but clean towels, some bottles she had filled with water, a first aid kit. You never know when an earthquake will hit. She looks in her bag after packing her first few items, thinking, what else should I bring? She thought as she puts her cape in the bag as well. She tosses a handful of bits Twilight had given her in the bag as well before picking it up, and she heads downstairs looking around. Twilight wasn't in the main hall of the library, so she figured she was either still in the kitchen or upstairs. She puts on the saddlebags by the door before looking at the time. It was still early, so she took down the book on equestrian history and she had been reading before she settles down in her spot to read. Shortly after getting settled in and started to read, she could hear movement from the kitchen before Twilight came out. She heard Twilight move across the main hall into her desk and heard the shuffling of papers. She looked over to see what she was up to before going back to her, seeing that Twilight was cleaning up the desk she had been at when she came downstairs. She finished up the chapter she had been reading and checked the time again. Smiling, she put the book marked down back into the book and put it away before looking over at Twilight, who was now double-checking her list. She smiled and went to her saddlebags before opening the door. "See you later, Twilight," she called over. Twilight looks over at Starbloom and smiled at her. "Have fun, Starbloom. Try not to cause too much trouble. Try not to read the same sentence over again." Twilight called back to her and smiled, hearing the giggle before she went out the door and closed the door, trotting down the street. She planned on meeting Sweetie Belle at Carousel Boutique first, then suggesting they go get Scootaloo at her house. She has a house? It was a good chance to try to find out if Scootaloo had a home. She made her way to the boutique quickly and knocked on the door, waiting quietly. "Good morning, Starbloom," Rarity said as she entered the door. "What brings you here this time of morning?" she asked, looking down at the small filly, smiling at her, moving to let her come inside. I came to get Sweetie Belle and then go pick up Skulu before going to meet Apple Bloom, Starbloom said as she went inside, smiling back at Rarity, looking around inside the boutique sale floors. It looked around about the same as the Careless Ed boutique in her world. I hope I'm not too early. Not at all, darling. I'll let Sweetie Belle know you're here, Rarity said with another genuine smile before heading up to Sweetie Belle's room to let her know a friend was here. Feel free to look around. Starbloom nods and smiles, watching as Rarity headed upstairs to get her sister. She looked around the sales floor quietly. She waited, marveling at the dresses Rarity had for sale. She opens her saddlebag and pulls out a cape, tossing it over her back and ties it neck so it won't slip off. She hears Rarity and Sweetie Belle coming down the stairs. She turns and smiles up at them. Good morning, Sweetie Belle, Starbloom said. Sweetie Belle smiled at Starbloom, following her sister. She was also wearing her cape. She pushes past her sister and trotted over to Starbloom. Morning, Starbloom, Sweetie said, bouncing in the air with a cute little squeak in her voice, before blushing as her sister gave her a slightly annoyed look at being pushed past. Sorry, Rarity, Sweetie Belle said with a grin. Rarity just smiled and sighed. It's all right, Sweetie. Just be more careful. Now, feed Opal before you go, please, Rarity said, watching the two. And do try not to cause too much trouble or get dirty. All right, Rarity, Sweetie Belle said, heading to the kitchen and getting out Opal's food. Starbloom followed after Sweetie Belle to watch and offer some help if needed. Sweetie Belle seemed to be able to handle it, though, filling up Opal's bowl and putting the bag of food back in the cabinet. Starbloom was still amazed at how Rarity liked to keep everything neat and organized. She wasn't sure if it was because she was a filly, but she seemed to notice things differently than she had when she was Twilight. Ready to go, Starbloom? Sweetie Belle asked, bringing Starbloom out of her thoughts. She looks over at Sweetie Belle and smiles at her, nodding. Yep, I'm ready, she answered, following her out of the kitchen and back to the sales floor. Have a good day, Rarity, Starbloom said, smiling. Thank you, Starbloom. Have a good day. You be good, Sweetie Belle, and be back before it gets dark, Rarity said to the two small fillies by the door. I will, Rarity, Sweetie Belle said, grinning as she opens the door, both she and Starbloom walking out of the boutique, Rarity giving Sweetie Belle a doubtful look as Sweetie closes the door. Sweetie Belle started to walk past Sweet Apple Acres, and Starbloom blinks at her. Shouldn't we go get Scootaloo? She asked as she moved to catch up with Sweetie Belle, tilting her head faintly. She normally meets us at the clubhouse. She's always there before anyone else, Sweetie Belle said, grinning at her as she kept walking to the farm. Starbloom didn't look convinced, but nodded at her as she walks with her head tilting her head again faintly. It didn't make much sense to her. Why would Scootaloo always be there before everyone else? Because that's her fucking home. She started to wonder if Sweetie Belle Applebloom had ever been to Scootaloo's home. She did consider that, since Scootaloo was a Pegasus, that she might live in a cloud home. But the only cloud home she knew of in the area was Rainbow Dash's house. What are you thinking about, Starbloom? Sweetie Belle asked, noticing the serious look on her face. She blinks at her, but kept walking with her to Sweet Apple Acres. You're still not worried about Twilight coming to Family Appreciation... Oh, I'm sorry. You're not still worried about Twilight coming to Family Apparition Day, are you? That woke me up. Apparition Day, yeah. Huh? Oh, no, I'm not worried about that, she said, smiling at Sweetie Belle, walking next to her, breathing in clean air, looking out up at the sky. She noticed some Pegasi moving clouds around. She took another breath, catching a hint of moisture in the air before looking back to Sweetie Belle, trying to avoid any further questions about what she was thinking. So she tried to change the subject. Looks like we're going to get some rain soon. Hope it won't mess up our crusading, she smiles at her as they reach the farm, letting Sweetie Belle lead as they start towards the clubhouse. Sweetie Belle looks up at the clouds before being moved in and looks over at Starbloom, nodding at her, smiling. Yeah, I guess so, but it shouldn't mess up our crusading. Scootaloo and Applebloom had a great idea. God! I was so close! It strikes again! Carbonated bubbles! Acid! Ah! Sweetie Belle grins big before trotting towards the clubhouse. Starbloom blinks at her before charging after her quickly to keep up, blinking, wondering what she had gotten herself into. They quickly reached the clubhouse when they started running across the field, smiling. Once they get to the clubhouse, they head up the ramp leading to the door, and Sweetie Belle opened the door. Applebloom and Scootaloo was already inside, talking about the plans for the day, both looking over at the door, smiling at them. Morning, Sweetie Belle. Morning, Starbloom, Applebloom said, smiling, Scootaloo waving a hoof towards them. Good morning, Scootaloo, Applebloom, Starbloom said, waving back, heading inside and over to them, removing her saddlebag. Scootaloo giving the saddlebags an odd look. Sweetie Belle follows Starbloom and takes a seat. I wasn't sure if I should bring anything, so I brought a few things. You didn't have to bring anything, Starbloom, but thanks. The line says, but thank you, but I just don't see Scootaloo saying, but thanks. I mean, I see her saying, but thanks, not but thank you. She doesn't seem like the type of pony to say thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just going for characterization here. Skulu stood smiling at her and wiggles her wings, heading to her saddlebags to see what Starbloom had brought, looking at the towels, blinking a bit, looking at her. What are these for? I figured if we get dirty or something, we can use them to get cleaned up. She nods at Skulu, smiling at her, watching as she unpacked the saddlebags. The water is well for when we get thirsty, and first aid kit if we get a cut or something. She smiles at all three of her friends. That's good thinking, Starbloom, Applebloom said, smiling at her, getting one of the bottles of water, removes the top, taking a drink from it, getting to her feet, putting the water down. Time for your initiation since it keeps getting put off, Applebloom said, smiling at her before moving to stand next to a podium. Skulu heading over to a drum as Sweetie Belle makes her way stand behind the podium, hopping up on a box and moves to her back legs, putting her forelegs on the podium, smiling. Starbloom moves to stand in front of the podium, looking up at Sweetie Belle with a big smile on her face. It was similar as to when she got accepted to Princess Celestia School for the Gifted. Sweetie Belle looked at her revised speech and cleared her throat before speaking. Don't be the pod-raising crap. We are gathered here today to welcome Starbloom as the member of the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Our goal is to crusade so we may one day get our cutie marks. We pledge to stand beside our fellow sister in our crusade. Sweetie Belle spoke in a rather overdramatic tone. Well, that was really overdramatic, Freddy. You idiot. Don't even know emotions. She continued speaking, looking at Starbloom. Now repeat after me. I, Starbloom, promise to do my best to help my fellow Crusaders in the pursuit of our cutie mark. All three of them was looking at Smiling Big. Oh, there's a pony named Smiling Big. That's great. Welcome to Ponyville, Smiling Big. Starbloom took a deep breath and smiled big before repeating what Sweetie Belle said. I, Starbloom, promise to do my best to help my fellow Crusaders in the pursuit of our cutie mark, she said, smiling at her friends with a grin, looking. All three stomped their hooves on the ground, smiling big at Starbloom. You're now an official member and sister of the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Welcome to our little family. Oh. Well, that was Sweetie Belle's voice, and Applebloom said it, smiling at Starbloom and the other two nodding, still with big grins on their faces. And now that's out of the way, let's do some crusading. Me and Skulu got it all worked out while you two was coming over. Gum. Jam hunting. Gum hunting. I was stupid. Starbloom blinked at Applebloom as the other two came over. Oh, I know where this is going. Oh, Diamond Dogs. Yay! Please. Starbloom blinked at Applebloom as the other two come over and all three shouted at once. Cutie Mark Crusader Gem Hunters. Yay! Then clapped their hooves together before looking at Starbloom. Confused at first, she went over and clapped her hoof with the other three and added her own, yay? The other three grinning at her when she does that. She wasn't too sure if this was a good idea. But gem hunting was pretty safe. She just hoped they didn't run into any diamond dogs. Oh, you better! You better fucking run into diamond dogs! You better! The other three started to gather up what they would need to dig in the ground, so Starbloom repacked her saddlebags and put it across her back. Sweetie Belle came over smiling and tucked the folding shovel into one of her saddlebags. You'll need a shovel to dig with, Sweetie Belle said, smiling at her before going to get her own shovel. Once all of them had their stuff ready, they left the clubhouse. The clouds were getting a bit thicker than earlier, but it hadn't gotten too dark. The Crusaders headed out away from the clubhouse and Sweet Apple Acres, the four of them making their way out to the gem fields. Something had been bugging her, though, about the gem hunting idea. As they got to the gem fields, Starbloom asked a question that popped into her head. How are we going to find the gems? The other three stopped and looked at each other before looking back at Starbloom, grinning a bit. We'll just dig around till we find them, Skulu said, the other two nodding and they were firmly giggling as they head out to the gem fields. Skulu and Applebloom getting out the shovels and start to dig around. Sweetie Belle also takes out a shovel and starts to dig as well. Starbloom rolling her eyes lightly before smiling and sighs, taking out off her saddlebag and removes her shovel, joining them in the hunt for gems. They spent about an hour digging around and they did manage to find a few small pockets of gems, but no large collections. They took the gems they found and put them in Starbloom's saddlebag, since she was the only one that brought one. After digging around a bit more and not finding any more gems or getting a cutie mark, they decided that was enough. Gem hunting ain't for us, I guess, Applebloom said, helping Starbloom get her saddlebags on. Sweetie Belle jumped, hearing a noise. What was that? She asked, looking at the others, who started to look around suspiciously. I swear I heard something, she said, moving to stand with the others. Like a rustling sound in the bushes. Diamond dogs. Wrong place, wrong time, little fillies. Yay. Starbloom started to feel nervous and peered over at the bushes, watching them quietly, the other three standing next to her left, also looking into the bushes before she felt something pull her saddlebag. Hey! She reared back and bucked hard at what grabbed the saddlebags from behind. She heard a loud wail, and they turned to face who it was. It was the diamond dog, holding his stomach, glaring. But which one is it? Because now I gotta do their voices. Give us the gems in the bag, he demanded. Two other dogs coming out, probably the leader. Two other dogs coming out from behind a rock, another one coming from the brush they had looked at. Give them now, he demanded, peering at the small group of fillies. Starbloom and Skulu both growled, peering back. Applebloom had her eyes narrowed as she looked at the one coming to them from the bushes, ready to fight if she had to. Sweetie Belle tried to look as threatening as she could at the closest one to them, but the look just made her look a little ill. Starbloom wasn't sure if they could stand a chance in a fight head-on with the larger diamond dogs. She thought quickly and remembered how Rarity handled them before. She couldn't reach the high-pitched whine like Rarity, but she glanced at Sweetie Belle and got an idea. Sorry about this, sweetie, she said, and quickly, before Sweetie could respond, she bit her on the ear, firm but not hard enough to break the skin. The bite made Sweetie Belle squeal loudly in pain and wail in a high-pitched voice. The other two Crusaders looked at Starbloom and Sweetie Belle with a shocked look on their faces. The diamond dogs hissed loudly and held their ears before scrambling out quickly to get away from the high-pitched whining of Sweetie Belle. Come on! Don't cock-block me! Seriously! Starbloom quickly let go of Sweetie Belle's ear with her teeth, glancing around. Run! She told the other Crusaders before bolting as fast as she could, looking back to make sure the other three followed after her, which they did. It didn't take long before they reached the clubhouse. Panting hard, Starbloom squirming the saddlebags off and checked Sweetie Belle's ears and apologizing profusely for biting her. I'm so sorry, Sweetie Belle. I didn't want to hurt you, but it was the only way I could think of to make them leave, she said, the Applebloom and Skulu. The Applebloom! It's not Applebloom, it's the Applebloom, the one and only Applebloom and Skulu, both looking upset at Starbloom. Sweetie Belle sniffed loudly and flicked her bitten ear lightly, wiping her eyes with her hooves before hugging Starbloom. I understand. I remember Rarity told me the diamond dogs don't like high-pitched sounds. She blinked her eyes, clearing the tears from them. But how did you know that? She asked, looking at Starbloom confused. The other two looked at Starbloom as well, also confused and wondering the same thing now. Their anger at Starbloom for biting Sweetie Belle forgotten now. Yeah, how did you know about that? Applebloom asked, taking a seat next to Sweetie Belle, waiting for an answer. Starbloom had to think quickly. She didn't think they would buy it if she told them Twilight had told her about it. I read it in a book in the library, she said, nodding quietly and smiling, hoping they would believe her. The other Crusaders looked at her for a moment and she felt nervous, thinking they wouldn't believe her. You must read a lot of books, then, Skulu said, nodding and smiles. Lucky for us you're an egghead. I don't think Sweetie Belle would have thought about whining in time to save us. That earned her a nasty look from Sweetie Belle, still flicking her ear a little. I would have thought about it eventually. Besides, I didn't see you coming up with any ideas, Sweetie Belle said, huffing a bit and puffing out her cheeks in a pout. All that, and no cutie mark either. At least we got some gems, though, she said, reminding the group about the gems they'd found. How many did we get? Starbloom blinked as the group looked at her. She goes over the saddlebags and opens it up, checking inside before taking out the gems she had gotten. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3... She went on counting them carefully as the others watched her intently. 46. Not too bad, really, she said, smiling at her friends. She split the gems out evenly between herself and their friends, giving each 11 of the gems that were close to the same size. Well, we got 2 left over. What should we do with them? Everyone looked over at Applebloom, waiting for an answer. Excuse me. Why y'all looking at me? Applebloom asked, blinking at her friends before thinking for a minute, trying to decide. I think we should give them to Sweetie Belle and Starbloom, since they did save us from those dogs, he said, after considering it for a few moments. Skulu nodded in agreement, smiling. I agree, we should let Sweetie Belle and Starbloom have them, Skulu smiled, taking the 2 leftover gems, giving one to Starbloom and the other to Sweetie Belle, both of them looking a little confused, but nodded. Thank you, Skulu. Applebloom, Starbloom said, smiling, but took Sweetie Belle's extra gem and replaced it with the one Skulu gave her. I think Sweetie Belle should have the bigger one, since she got hurt. Skulu and Applebloom smiled at Starbloom's gesture. Sweetie Belle looked at Starbloom, Applebloom, and Skulu for a moment before smiling and gave them a big group hug. Aw, thank you. You didn't have to do that, Sweetie Belle said before sitting back. The other 3 Crusaders hugging back in the group hug, smiling. Starbloom broke loose of the hug at the moment and looked out the window, wanting to check on the weather. The clouds were thick and threatened rain. Looks like we're going to be in for a good shower soon. If you want to get home before the rain comes, I think we should call it a day. The sky was dark, making it hard to judge what time it was. She could just make out the sun, though, so she figured it was close to 3 in the afternoon, maybe even 4. End of